Good evening and welcome to Kenya Decides on KBC channel. We'll be live on Facebook, you're live on YouTube, you're live on Twitter. The program is Kenya Decides and the hashtag is Kenya Decides 2022. You can join in this conversation. Our conversation tonight is on social media and politics. We're about 40 days towards the next general election, and it appears like political parties as well as pundits and players are investing a lot in social media. At this very critical time, what role does social media play in shaping the politics that will happen in the next 1 month or that has been happening as we head towards the next general election? My name is John Jacob Kyoria. You're very much welcome to the program. In studio, I have Jane Koigi, who is the head of research at Nendo, is a digital growth consultancy providing marketing, research, strategy, and consulting in Kenya. I also have Charles Mungai, who is in charge of digital media at Kenya Broadcasting Corporation here, KBC. We also expect Philip Ogola, who is a digital strategist with lots of years of experience, and of course now working with Azimio La Umoja. But largely he will be here to concentrate much on the use of social media and how it is able to influence politics. Lady and gentlemen, karibuni sana.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
To set us off in this conversation, Jane, how does social media influence politics at this very critical time?
I think to answer that question, we would have to go back to the 2002 elections. If you look at how elections were carried out at that time, parties would have to actually call a conference in order to get information relayed out to the public. They'd have to, send out a press release. But what we're seeing right now is that parties are actually using social media. You don't have to wait for something like that. You're seeing parties are taking over social media. They're taking over different platforms. They know that the social media has a bigger impact. It has a higher reach. And you can see the importance of that when you look at the difference of how they did it in 2002, 20 years ago, versus how they're doing it now. It just goes to show the value of social media in terms of reaching a wider audience and in terms of reaching and spreading the communication that they want. Yeah.
Charles, obviously the background you have of working for an active broadcasting house in this election and looking at the trends, how is social media shaping up the politics of 2022?
In terms of politics and social media, I would say that 2022 is only carrying on from where we were in 2017 and also to some extent around 2007, 2013. When it started initially, it was purely just, trying to sort of come in and show that as a candidate, you're relatable to the youth. That has changed now because you're finding that, number one, it's affecting a couple of things, even in terms of the business model of media. Number one is the fact that when you look at campaigns all over the world now, even in Kenya, particularly for the 2022 election, is that there is a significant move of investment from traditional media in terms of time, in terms of money, in terms of attention by the audience. So you're finding that if it is money, the candidates would spend that money, say now on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and this spend comes in different formats. Number one, it could be that perhaps you have a team of influencers that push these activities around your candidate or candidates. Then there is the aspect of paying to actually have a sponsored post, perhaps on Facebook or on Twitter or on Instagram. Then the other thing, of course, now in terms of audiences is the fact that digital enables you to have something we call targeted messaging. So, for example, if I am a candidate, let's say, for example, I'm a presidential candidate, the message I want to pass for people in Nairobi is perhaps different from the message I want to pass for people in Mombasa. And what I'll do is probably just go on the social media platforms like Facebook, like Twitter, like Instagram, and then probably post that post, video or poster, probably even not post it, but just put it as an advert, but targeting particularly people within the region that I want to target with that message. Yeah, and so then there's that whole aspect of being able to hone in on the particular message you want to the particular target that you want that message to reach to. So that's in terms of the messaging. The third one is now in terms of the ability to influence or persuade. Yeah? Though there's a very thin line there, because what you're finding now is that that's where the whole aspect of propaganda comes in, misinformation, and that then becomes a whole other nightmare, because then you find that initially the media were purveyors of truth, and the public were relying on the media to be able to verify this information. But then now you come to the social media platforms where now people are able to take that message and twist it and try and put it in a certain way so that it persuades their target audience or voter to be able to take a certain action.
Hold that up, because at some point we'll talk about the abuse of the social media. Quite an interesting line.
Yeah.
But you would agree, Jane, the use of social media, particularly when it comes to politics, it relies on the third thing that Charles touches on, just much on the aspect of persuasion and trying to sway people a particular way. Sometimes it doesn't appear really like it wants to pass information, but it concentrates on swaying.
Yes, social media is about swaying. A lot of what you find a lot of people doing online is to try and sway someone to a certain direction, and social media is one of the best ways to do that. And as Charles has alluded to, misinformation, which we'll discuss, as you've said later, or a certain targeted information. It's about swaying. And what better way to do that than social media? And then you find that if you start a topic on one platform, it's easily picked up by another platform. Then it becomes a loop of conversations going round. And at the end of the day, a lot of people believe what they see online. A lot of people will say, well, I saw that on TikTok, or I saw that on Twitter, you must be right. So there's a lot of swaying that goes around based on what social media is showing us, which is a positive and a negative. The positive is sometimes it could be a truth that we want to convey, and the message is caught on, and the message spreads quite fast. Or sometimes it could be fake, which has detrimental effects if it catches on and if it's taken to be truth. But yes, social media plays a huge role in swaying. Especially in this period of elections, you can see why most of the political parties are going online. They know they have a higher chance of swaying a conversation, of swaying an opinion, if they're doing it through social media. Very huge effect.
Comparing to the time when there was no social media, I would assume, the accessibility to a politician, Charles, is a politician now more accessible or less accessible, comparing to when there was no social media, vis-a-vis to this time now, when they're very active on social media?
I would say that there is a perception that the politician is now more accessible. And why I say it's a perception is because whereas now the social media platforms look like they provide, initially the media was just you talk to the audience, talk, but there was no way of the audience being able to, sort of give feedback, and be able to check what is being said, to put the politicians accountable. And initially then the media sort of became gatekeepers. And that means that as a politician, you could get away with really, with anything almost, if you could be able to make sure that the media is in your corner. But now that gatekeeping role has been eliminated, and which then means that yes, it comes as a double-edged sword. Number one is the fact that now you perhaps as a politician have accessibility to the public without the need of the media, but at the same time is that this public will also hold you accountable. And yes, there is a perception. Why I said there was a perception is because sometimes some of these people, remember their personalities, they have social media teams. Okay? And therefore, as much as perhaps they could feel it's just like the way you have social media today, and you feel like, you know, one of your, you may not have seen a friend for 5-10 years, but because they keep posting on social media, you feel like you know how they're doing, you feel like you know they're okay, but it's a perception. Whether it's really true is open to a lot of different interpretation. But in terms of accessibility of the politician, yes, there's accessibility, but the question is it just a picture or a face they put out, but in essence they're really not accessible. They're just doing it because it's the thing to do and make you feel like they're hearing you, but they really aren't. They might as well just have all that feedback collected and ignore it.
Jen, I'm asking that because at some point President Uhuru Kenyatta was on Twitter, for example, and Facebook, and then he had deactivated his account. Before then, he used to be live on Facebook. Sometimes would even set topical questions, and there are people who would actually ask him questions and he would respond. Do you think there's an accessibility problem, particularly if a politician is out of social media?
Well, you know, when a politician is out of social media, it could be because of certain reasons. And one, we do not want the politician to feel attacked. And if they put themselves out there and the public is attacking them, or there's that perception that they're attacking them, they might decide to move away from that limelight of the social media aspect. You know, are they accessible in that sense? Yes, if when he was there and he's answering questions and he's engaging with the Kenyans, of course they feel we're having access to our president. He is answering our questions. We feel we're heard. So that's a very positive thing. But then social media, as we keep saying, has its negatives, where some people will take that opportunity to actually start spreading really bad information and really bad communication with the person that's supposed to be engaging them. And we remember he actually had to step away because of some of the really harsh tones and harsh messages that were coming towards him. And in that sense, people do withdraw. The president aside, I think generally, even as a human being, if you're attacked on social media, which happens a lot, and that's part of some of the things we can discuss later when it comes to misinformation and abuse of social media, you would tend to withdraw. And in that sense, you're no longer engaging, which is a disadvantage, because I would assume you know, the public wants to engage, so why not let it be a platform for engaging?
He actually called them a social media. But in terms of age, because it's a question that has come up over time, is social media about age? Is it about a constituency? Has it become a necessity?
So we find that, you know, the age group that uses social media is the age of between 16 and 64 years old. They're the ones that use social media. 64-year-olds. Okay. And, you know, Facebook is one of the mediums that really resonates with an older segment. And that's where they will be engaging with this. So, yeah, there's the idea of who it's segmented to. It depends. You find Twitter is more of a youth, younger generation. We find that Instagram is more of you know, younger generation as well, where people want to be entertained with content, which means if a political party is going to engage on Instagram, they need to make it more entertaining for the audience that's coming on there. If you're going to go on Twitter, you want to engage in a conversation. You want to be more serious in your conversations on Twitter. If you're going on Facebook, you have to also imagine which the demographic you're talking to. My grandmother is most likely on Facebook. Those are the people who now you're targeting. So yeah, even when you're targeting your message, you need to be careful about which demographic you're talking to and how you're going to present this information.
Quite interesting. Your thoughts, Charles?
I think when we look at social media, there are other platforms that sort of don't come up in the normal conversation. But I think that in terms of politics and the election campaign are quite significant tools that need to be also considered. For example, you'll find that for information, like they say that a lie can take, you know, a couple of trips around the world before the truth even starts doing one step, you see. So you find that, especially in politics, you'll find that they'll disseminate perhaps a message, say maybe on Facebook, on Twitter, because it's easier to be picked from there by the larger public. But then the target audience of that message, particularly, for example, if you look at this election season, you'll find that, you'll take someone who'll take a video and then manipulate it in a certain way, because the target audience of that video, particularly, for example, like the issues profiled about the different age groups on the different platforms, you'll find that there is a platform called, like if you look at WhatsApp, okay? It's a very powerful platform, these WhatsApp groups. I do recall that it got to even a point where now the Communication Authority actually had to say that as admins in those WhatsApp groups, you will be responsible for the content that goes into those groups. Because now you find that the people coming up with this content are coming up with this content, but they want it to reach particularly to an age group that are the actual people who vote. And these actual people, because you have a whole social media audience that, if you remember, there have been candidates who've been big on social media, but when it comes to turning up their vote, that sort of doesn't happen. And so what now they've realized is, okay, this audience that actually votes, you'll find for most people now, even if your mom or dad doesn't know how to use a smartphone, but they particularly have a phone that has WhatsApp. You'll buy them the phone, you will install WhatsApp, and then they will join the different WhatsApp groups, maybe for their county, the surrounding area, and that's where now they have those communication and conversations. And so these people now come up with these messages, put them on Facebook, on Twitter, but that's not actually the destination of that message. The destination of that message is a WhatsApp group, so they just need you to take the message and then put it in WhatsApp, and then it does its rounds in WhatsApp. And so we must also then begin to become alive. Even the audience needs to become alive to the reality that some of these messages and information that you find on Facebook, sometimes it's not necessary for you to pick it and start disseminating it on some of these other platforms, because as much as you may be able to sift between truth and mistruth, then sometimes the people you're disseminating it to, who perhaps are the actual target audience, you are just a channel, then they may not be able to have access to the platforms that you have or the information that you have to be able to sift through and tell, oh, this was true and this was not true.
Jen, I see a positive side out of this thing. We have 8 million youths who are registered now and supposed to vote in the next election. Unfortunately, looking at the last 4-5 years, the youth appear disinterested in some way, either disinterested in politics or issues of governance. Now that they are in social media, and statistics prove it's quite a number of them that are in social media, is it possible then to use social media to rally them towards a cause in governance?
One, the cause that we are rallying them to has to be a cause that is close to them, the cause that will impact them, and a cause that would make them engage and rally. You cannot engage them in a cause that does not have an impact on them. Once you create a cause that they actually relate to, it's quite easy to do that. And social media, as you've said, is one of the key factors that they will use, and they will actually use that to spearhead, they'll use that to rally, they'll use that to spread more information. So one, if you want to engage the youth, engage them in a topic that is one of concern to them. Two, engage them in a platform that is relevant to them. TikTok right now is a huge platform in Kenya, and we find that from 2020, video messaging really picked up. That's where TikTok really spiked up in Kenya. That's where YouTube video spiked up in Kenya. If you want to do that, engage them in a platform that is relevant to them. Engage them in a platform that is exciting to them. And you'll have your numbers. You'll have the people wanting to actually listen to you and to actually want to engage with what you're saying. Yeah.
Looking at the trends, as you answer that.
If I might add to that, the challenge that you have with this youthful audience is that people are actually underestimating their ability to interrogate information. So you find that in past elections, it was good enough to probably bring a youth person on the podium to say, sisi wa youth, tuko na fulani fulani, and things like that. But what is happening now, and that is why you're saying there is some sort of, the youth now are not feeling this whole election, vibe, is because what's happening is that it's not enough to tell them we'll give you jobs, because that has been told. But now what they want is, if you're going to actually do a video, then you need to say, what will we do to create these jobs? Okay? For example, you will find that there are, let me take an example of one issue that's very touchy on social media. You've seen these content creators, particularly like artists, go up on social media and highlight the amount of money they received in terms of payment for their music. And some of them saying, I don't need this money, you can keep it. Because really you can't tell me in a whole year, this is how much I've earned vis-a-vis the money I'm able to earn on my own. And yet you're the body that is supposed to take rights, payments for rights of this music. And they know that, the thing is, they know what are the, if you look at the people who are putting money in terms of rights, their media houses, their businesses, all these people pay for rights of music. But then when it comes to the actual money that ends up to the musician, then, that there's something that's not adding up. So now, if you're going to talk then about creating opportunities, job opportunities, because for most of them, they are not even looking for the white-collar jobs. Okay, they've already settled to the fact that that's going to be a tall order, and for most of them now they're looking at the gig economy and those different initiatives. If you look at, for example, an initiative like Ajira, it has had quite an uptick. But the thing is, if you're going to put it as a political issue, now then, if you're going to do a video, you need to be very elaborate. And then that will enable them now to rally behind that cause or behind that initiative, because now it actually it adds up. So I think that's something that then needs...
Jane, I wanted to let go of that issue, but still I can't. For one reason, as we seek to approach the youth, because you talk about, breaking down some of these things, probably from the complexities of bureaucracy and stuff like that, to something relatable. Sometimes people tend to assume that the youth on social media are so shallow, in the sense that they cannot understand these things. So speaking to them in their language is probably to mean they're too shallow to understand.
Well, that would be you're underestimating a large group of people, because the youth are the ones that are on social media. To just talk about the strength of the youth on social media, let's look at Kenyans on Twitter. When there's a cause to be rallied on, they come out in droves to just support that cause. These are people who you cannot assume you can speak to them in simplicity. You cannot assume you'll speak to them in a matter of nonchalant, or they will not get what we're saying. You need to approach this youth, as he said, they need to know that their issues are being addressed. And social media cannot just be a place where you go, you use the lingo, or you use a hashtag, and you think to yourself, oh, no, I have them. No. These are people, and we have seen this in research, we have seen these are people who are going into a social media space, they're breaking down the conversation, and they're asking questions. What does this mean? We have our two political parties who've come up with different hashtags of what the economy means to them. There's bottom up, there's person Fukoni, and the conversation online is, what do these terms mean? What do they mean to me and for me? So you see, you cannot just approach it in the sense that they're not thinking beyond right now because they're young. No. The youth needs to get some of these things addressed. This is something we found in research. They need to get them addressed. They need to understand, when you come up with a concept, they need to understand what it is. They need to understand the depth of what you're talking about as a political party. You can't just sway them with language. You can't just sway them with music. No. The youth are discerning.
It doesn't mean you need to bite your tongue trying to speak.
No.
Charles, there's the question of crowding. The usual voices who are speaking in our campaign rallies are probably the same people dominating social media, in the sense that the same voices that we hear from the political rallies are the same voices being amplified by the very same people on social media. Does social media give new voices a platform?
Yes. In summary to your question, yes.
Okay.
It does give new voices a better space. With social media, and that is why we have influencers, right? If you looked at marketing budgets years ago, or even political communication budgets years ago, you would spend on PR because then you need access to the media, to a show like this, where you come and probably your PR person is there giving you what your talking points are going to be. But if you look at that, if you look at it today, let's take, for example, you've got this, sometimes the media will then, thin out a whole political campaign to a select few, right? But then if you look at the political campaign today, you've got a candidate who's been able to take up certain issues that initially seemed, like they were no-go zones. For example, ban, right? But then you find that because you've picked up on that issue and you're more, you have more issues that don't go with the flow of what we are used to, then you find that now these people are able to come in and amplify this message, because also people are looking for authenticity. You find that, for example, it is very clear if you look at what different politicians say or political parties, and that is why a guy like Trump was able to have to rally people behind him, because he would be able to use social media to say what he actually means. It doesn't need to be packaged in a certain way that mainstream media has made the larger audience feel that this information needs to be packaged. So in terms of giving people, new voices, the space to be able to express themselves, if you learn how to be able to be authentic and to have your facts, and your information well arranged, you can be able to give a proper background. You can be able to address it in a manner that is relatable to the audience. Then it is very easy for you to be able to penetrate and get your message heard. But then, of course, again, sometimes, like you said, it feels like the people we see on TV end up being the same voices on these platforms. How is that happening? Because remember, these people are also using this, a certain, now you find that they're also like gatekeepers of these platforms, because you find people who have built audiences and they know how to communicate to their audiences. Perhaps I'm a comedian, perhaps I'm a fashion person, perhaps I'm a business person. I have got a certain audience that listens to me. And therefore, what as a politician you will do is that you will take your message, you will come to me and tell me, I need you to package my message for your audience. And so those are what we then call influencers. And so then it tends to feel like, because again, remember that even this media time that some of these people get is because they're able to organize, campaign meetings or rallies that then get covered. But what if you don't have the resources to arrange a rally, or to go out as many times, or to have the media follow you around? So that then makes it feel like, and also don't forget that the media stations themselves also are on these platforms. So you have, and the public also still has this place that they have given to media in terms of mainstream media, being still purveyors of truth and ability to fact check and proof information. So if these media houses still also take this content and disseminate it, then you still get the feeling like the people you saw on TV are still the guys who are running the show on the platforms.
I want us to take a breather, but of course when we come back, and of course also bring in Philip Ogola. We'll talk about vitu kwa ground ni different. Talk about offline and online. Sometimes a person is an online sensation. Siku ya kura ikifika, maajabu. We're taking a breather. You're watching Kenya Decides. Keep tweeting and keep talking to us. We appreciate your company. We're taking a breather. Don't go too far.
Hujapoteza uzuri wako wala heshima yako.
Mbona hauko mwazi na mimi? Amesema nini?
Hajasema chochote, ni yale maneno mimi niliyomtupia. Ndio nina hakika Kate atafikiria mambo yake kichwani na atafanya kitu ambacho sio kizuri.
Wewe na bad story kwisha.
Wewe utasikiaje mtu aje nyumbani kwako tuna kumchukua Hana?
Don't you even think about that.
Griffin.
Your Highness.
You're still alive? Where have you been all of these years?
You wretch. You dare bring a black snake here?
What do you want?
Have a guess.
Hey, what are you doing?
Now that I've been exposed, heaven will hear about this. I'll be back in a few days.
Calm down, beautiful. Hujapoteza uzuri wako wala heshima yako.
Mbona hauko mwazi na mimi? Amesema nini?
Hajasema chochote, ni yale maneno mimi niliyomtupia. Ndio nina hakika Kate atafikiria mambo yake kichwani na atafanya kitu ambacho sio kizuri.
Wewe na bad story kwisha.
Wewe utasikiaje mtu aje nyumbani kwako tuna kumchukua Hana?
Don't you even think about that.
After working for me all these years, it should be pretty clear to you that I'm not someone you'd want to be an enemy.
Well, I wanted you to know that I've been in love with Jaime. Doctor, what is it?
I'm sorry, Madam, but your baby's dead.
You were a murderer. You killed my baby. Get out of here now. I want you out. I hate seeing you happy. I hope one day you suffer pain far worse than what I'm suffering right now.
The Postal Corporation of Kenya Staff Pension Scheme and Staff Retirement Benefit Scheme will be holding its annual general meeting on 30th June 2022 at the Hilton Hotel Ballroom from 9:30 a.m. The event will be live on KBC Channel 1. Postal Corporation of Kenya Staff Pension Scheme. My pension, my comfort.
With less than 2 months remaining to August 9th, battle lines have been drawn in Kakamega County, with candidates receiving clearance from the IEBC to vie for the seat. This Thursday, 30th June, tune in to KBC Channel 1 from 9:50 p.m. for a live gubernatorial debate and get to know each candidate's development agenda for Kakamega County.
Welcome back to Kenya Decides on Twitter using the hashtag Kenya Decides 2022. Let's talk about social media and its influence on politics. We've also been joined by Philip Ogola, who is a digital strategist, of course, with so many years of experience, now the head of digital communication in Azimio. How are you, sir?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, okay. Yep. Obviously, we had a bit of progress before you came in terms of how social media is influencing politics. So let's just pick it from where we stopped. In terms of offline and online campaigns, the question is sometimes you see politicians who are an online sensation. Ukifika kwa ground, mambo ni tofauti. What exactly happens when somebody is a sensation in social media, but ground?
Thanks so much. And this is a question which is normally asked. And social media has become like a must-have tool in terms of go-to for information. And you find that it's only popular in like urban towns. So you'll find that as something which is trending in Nairobi, the village guys have no idea. So there's a huge disconnect between what is trending online and actually offline on the ground. So we need to focus more on actually offline.
That's about the same.
Yeah, no, I was just about to say the same. The more you move away from the urban areas, the more you go to the rural, peri-urban areas, the less social media usage there is in those areas. So, of course, as you're saying, what is trending is usually more within the urban context, and we find that majority of Facebook users and Twitter are usually in the urban areas. So the further out you go, then the less contact and the less information you have that is being spread out in social media. So what they're discussing may not really relate to what is happening in the social media space. So vitu kwa ground is not always the same as what is happening online.
What both of you say brings out something interesting. The issue of access, number one, to social media. And number two, is it also possible? The same question we were talking about age. Probably there's a crux of people, qua ground, who do not relate whatsoever with the hanky-pankies you're enjoying on social media.
Don't forget something else. That for a large number of people, if you look at the voter, they have a certain history with different candidates. Okay? And therefore that means that for some of them, their decision is already made on who they support. All right? The percentage you're dealing with to convince are a small percentage. Now, what does that therefore then mean? Number one, if you look at, yes, you talked about the issue of access. Don't forget that this is internet. Number one is that there is the issue of the smartphone itself. Then number two, there is the issue of the access to internet connectivity, which is also limited by another element called cost. Because between buying bundles and the other thing that I have to do with this money, in order of priority, if you look at the audience that perhaps actually, is the more mature audience, their list of priorities are already pretty much defined. The younger people is where, they'd feel like checking on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, in the order of priorities perhaps is much higher than maybe buying XYZ. And therefore they will put that money on social media, on bundles, and buy bundles and then go on social media. Because also don't forget that the scientific study has found there is a hormone, that causes you want, when you put something on social media, people have liked, people have commented, you want to see how many people actually reacted, you want to see what your friends put up, and that aspect of peer influence is very large on a certain generation of people, not the much older ones, but the much younger ones. So when you put all those factors then together, and you put the fact that also sometimes you're forgetting that, like they say in Kenya, politics is local. Okay? So what is making very much a big craze on the national circuit, when it comes locally, there is a whole different ballgame as to how that candidate gets elected or not elected. And that's why they say that even elections in Kenya, it's like it's not a marathon, it's a what? It's these very short races, where it's the last minute that counts, because in that last minute there are some certain messages that will come out. Some of them mostly propaganda. Someone will say, this 3-piece voting. Someone will say, oh, you need to make sure that Nani has a shoe, Nani has a shirt. That sort of forms the suit. You see. So when you go now locally, that's where these messages are happening.
All right.
Yeah.
In the space you're operating in, Philip, is there a point at which online campaigns can play a bigger role than offline campaigns?
It's online campaigns actually inform, like if you look at social media right now, so social media informs what's actually going to appear in the media. So I believe that like online campaigns actually drives the agenda in terms of what's actually, what are the talk points, what are the sentiments, and even changing perceptions. Twitter right now is actually being driven by a very young generation, between, let's say, a Gen Z, let's say 25 to probably 15. That young age are the ones who actually vibrant online. You find like the likes of us here, we're more of passive, we just read and stuff. But the actual opinion shapers are actually the young generation. They're the ones who dictate the kind of topic which is trending. They're the ones who dictate the talkability on the digital space.
How do you respond to those who say sometimes online is torture? Torture in the sense like, for example, I hate to use this example, but I'll use it. Peter Kenneth in 2013, when he announced his presidential bid, he was such an online sensation. I think when the results came out finally, he polled at number 5 or something. So the others think, okay, online is good, but ni torture too.
To me, I think social media gives you, especially from a candidate perspective, it gives you the pulse on the ground. You get to understand what people are talking about, but it doesn't necessarily mean results. You have to get offline to actually do the donkey work.
Quite interesting. Let's talk about abuse. Because social media, in Kenya particularly, when you mention social media, the only thing people think about is the abuse, because that's what we have seen. And we have even seen the cases of Cambridge Analytica. Let's talk about abuse. Jim, how is social media being abused in the country?
Well, unfortunately, as we said, social media can be a positive thing and it can be a negative thing. In terms of the negativity is how quickly it is to get fake news stirred up in the social media space, and how quickly it takes to just spread out. One, let's talk about something like it's fake news, and fake news in Kenya can take different disorders. It can be misinformation, where it's a topic that is just supposed to mislead. When that is spread out in social media spaces like WhatsApp, you find Kenyans forward you something saying forwarded as received, and most people will do that. Forwarded as received. And when they do that, they don't really understand that they are spreading fake news. We also have disinformation, which is fake news that is supposed to cause harm, and this is someone who's actually doing that with that intent, and that again takes place in social media. And also we have malinformation, which could actually be when there's an actual picture of an actual event that actually happened, but is being misconstrued to a certain way that is definitely intended to cause harm to a situation or to the country. And the best way to do this is social media. That's the fastest way you will get that information and spread it out. But we have, like in Nendo, we use an online quiz, even which your audience can use to right now. It's called Stop, Reflect, Verify, where you can go online and check, is the information you're getting correct? Yes, you're getting it online. Yes, you're getting it from social media platforms, but is it correct? And yes, we find that unfortunately, social media is one of the key places where fake news starts and fake news spreads widely.
Why is it so convenient, particularly at this time, when we are headed towards an election? Within the political cycle, the very last few months of heading to the elections, it's a very convenient tool for politicians.
Because of what we said, that it's very easy for a lie to make a few laps around the world before even the truth has stood to make a step. And also a lie, to some extent, is also easily believable. And this is where now it comes in an element of what we call in military terms, it has been called PSYOPs. It is basically psychological operations. They say that before a battle actually takes place on the ground, you have to have taken its place in the mind and actually won there. And so that is where now politicians are using, it becomes very convenient for them to be able to use this tool, take these messages, manipulate them. You could have a video that is sliced, by inputting different messages of a person in different places, just to put out a message that is very wrong. You could have a photo that is taken, but like she said, there are different tools you can use online to actually go and verify that. Because like now, for example, you have a Google reverse image search, where you can be able to go and put on a tool on Google and be able to check a photo. When was the first time this photo was actually taken? And that is how sometimes some of these images that have been taken and manipulated, people have actually been called out for it. But it is very convenient because also, remember, like we said, it's also helped by psychologically. there's a whole bunch of people who have already made up their minds that I am with so and so. And so when information comes that is misleading or, is meant to is very distasteful about the opinion, about the, opponent, then it's very easy for you who is aligned to a certain perspective, because you've already made your decision, to then push it around. Because remember that this information is only as powerful as the people it's able to reach to. And therefore, if you have a large group of people who are willing to push this information because it fits within their, their frame of thought or their way of seeing things, then it becomes all the more difficult to manage it and to control it. And for politicians, that is the sweet spot.
Philip, some of these facts sometimes border on emotional manipulation. And yet, in terms of the empowerment of the consumers of social media, to know what is fake and what is not, there appears like there's not so much concentration on the empowerment of sifting between the truths, the half-truths, and the outright lies.
I think what we lack as a society, we lack a debunking mechanism. We lack frameworks which can actually educate our consumers on how to cross-verify news. As in, we're living in a society that is driven by sheer online fame, where breaking news is like currency. Being the first to actually post something is people actually fighting for it. So I think we need to have measures, especially from school, universities, where people are actually educated on how to actually cross-verify news. And there's so many tools. There are tools which can actually verify videos. You can and every photo actually has an EXIF data. Any photo right now, you can actually scrap that data and actually trace it. But you find that on the digital space, people are quick to actually, let's say if she posts something, I believe her. So we rarely take time to actually just take a breather. So the biggest gap we have right now is just raising awareness on how to actually pick fake news, on how to monitor some of these data patterns, because the people are out there to just manipulate content, and we are living in a generation that will do anything for fame, where they will spew propaganda just to actually seem to be the first to actually post. So what I'll say is we lack mentorship frameworks to actually guide people on how to not only pick and sift through noise. So we as a country, people like baited information. As in, how many guys actually sift through to actually look at the headline, to look at the website? Very few. People just like, I get messages from the village. They're like, "Is this true?" So, and for me, I look at WhatsApp is the biggest conveyor of fake news. By the time it comes to social media, it means it's actually gone viral on WhatsApp. Yeah.
Who are the stakeholders when we talk about the purveyors of this fake news and how to deal with that in terms of empowerment to the citizenry? Who are the stakeholders in this? Is it government, or who do we engage for this empowerment?
I think it's an all stakeholder. We all have a responsibility. I think it goes back to common sense, and I think even the civic organizations, we should be having a lot of awareness right now to actually educate the public on the do's and don'ts, especially on content consuming.
But sometimes even the spread of this misinformation, Jane, is because the person consuming it already has a fixed mind, and probably the fakes confirm their bias or entrench their bias.
Yeah, I think one of the things to think about when we are looking at the current election time, we have the highest number of undecided voters. And now let's look at what that has to do with fake news or misinformation. Yes. When you have misinformation and you're spreading this to a group of people who are still not decided on what to do, it really does sway their opinion. It's going to be something that will misconstrue what they should be thinking about, and it's most likely going to alter their perception about either the elections or the different candidates. And what challenge this poses is that you find they might actually decide, you know what, I found this piece of information, I think it's credible, I'm not going to participate at all, which is unfair because every citizen in Kenya has the right to participate in the elections. So for me, fake news or misinformation has a really huge impact when you look at the entire electoral body, which includes the people.
Except saying they're undecided, what is the other downside of misinformation in a young and probably fragile democracy like Kenya is?
So let me first start with the question you had asked, whose responsibility is it? Now, we started by saying that mainstream or mass media or mainstream media was the role that it played in the community or in the society was that it was seen to be the purveyor of truth. And that means that the reason being there was a professional code that then you have to verify information before you disseminate it. And that is because, as journalists, as media practitioners, we have to abide by a certain ethical rules or guidelines that ensure that then we do not spread information that is inaccurate. So in terms of responsibility, I would say that the first role of that responsibility again comes back to the media, because these social media platforms, remember, they are a sweet spot for people who want to be purveyors of falsehoods, because they allow them to bypass these sort of people who are there to fact check, because they could not push the same through mainstream media. Now then, coming back now to the issue of misinformation. I think one of the things that then needs to be very clear, I think we first of all need to look at it from a legal point of view, is that we need to probably put in place aspect, and there are already certain aspects of the law that are controlling, the ability of a user to put out misleading information about someone, okay? Because that is an illegality, first and foremost. But then what about if it is not just information about someone? I think also the other issue comes up is that during this election time, there is an attitude about anything goes, okay? And then accountability later. But then more so that accountability is dependent on what your alignment was. And that means that then we go against a key rule of governance, which is the rule of law. All right? So that means that the law applies to everyone equally. And so I think one of the things is that the public needs also to be able to start calling to account the people who are doing some of these things. So if it is a certain political wing or certain information is found out that it was inaccurate or misleading or just straight up, distasteful, then someone needs to start taking responsibility for the same.
All right. Let's talk about the legal regime, like you mentioned, Philip. Is it a deficiency of laws when it comes to regulation of social media in this country, or is just inaction from our forces? I'm thinking about Cambridge Analytica and the relationship they had in Kenya through Facebook. In other countries, in other jurisdictions, those are active cases in court. In Kenya, nothing.
That's a hard question, and it's when you look at it from a Kenyan perspective, we have challenges in the legal framework, and I think as a country we really need to ensure that the laws that actually guide in terms of the usage of social media and the digital space is actually enhanced, and as it is right now, there are actually gaps. And that's something which, as a country, we really need to actually amplify. When you look at Cambridge Analytica, from a Kenyan perspective, I can say that it really whipped up emotions in terms of it was kind of psychographic, kind of what you saw is not what I saw. As in each person was like you saw content based on your usage, as in they could mine your data and get to analyze what are your data patterns, and they send you stuff based on what you see. So like if I search Kenya and you search Kenya, we see different things, and I think that was a bit of invasion of privacy and stuff, and this time around at least it's been cut down. And I think when you look at Facebook and social media, there's some bit of tough laws, especially on the kind of data mining in this kind of election, I think there's some stringent laws, especially from the Facebook, Twitter, and the rest.
Even when there have been clear breaches of somebody's security or personal data, for example, other than the case of somebody like Robert Alai, who has been arraigned in court for posting President Uhuru Kenyatta's number publicly. But we are seeing that happening so oftenly, sometimes not involving high-profile figures. And even with existent laws that should punish these people, still nothing happens, even when there are clear breaches of somebody's privacy through social media.
And we have observed that. Even when we do a bit of research and we ask this type of questions, especially with regards to privacy, for some of them, nothing is done. Especially during the election time, we have a lot of invasion of privacy, as you said, towards certain political candidates or towards even aspirants, where you'll see some of their very private information is being put out on Facebook, or some of their very personal, details, even about their own personal lives and their families, is being put out on Facebook or on social media, either as a way of intimidation or as a way of just keeping the person quiet. And it's unfortunate, as you've said, we don't really see much action coming out of our lawmakers against that. Maybe once or twice we'll see someone being pulled, our police going to arrest someone or something happening in court. But I don't think the severity of what happens is really understood, because if it was, we wouldn't have a lot of that happening. What about the perpetrators? What happens to the people who are posting the information? We don't see anything happening, which I think makes it into a cycle of, if nothing happened to him, nothing will happen to me, nothing will happen to him. It becomes a cycle. So I think the most important thing is we need to see action from our lawmakers against the perpetrators of such information. You might be thinking, I'm just putting your phone number out there, but I've really, really infringed on your privacy.
Absolutely.
So I need to actually be held accountable for doing that. We need to see more of that. Yeah.
Mungai, you have the last word.
I think also there is an issue to do with the cost of access to justice. Okay? Because you find that for some people, first of all, there's the cost of access to justice, but number two also is that there is the issue of people knowing their rights. Because you have a whole data law now that prevents your information from being accessible or being used in a manner in which you have not given or authorized people to use. For example, when you sit here today and you receive a message from a certain politician on your phone, that for me is breach of my rights in terms of privacy, because I have not consented to you sending me those messages. But then the question then becomes, number one, is there a level of awareness to the public that this is not allowed, this is not correct? And in this case, if it happens, what should you do about it? But then number three also is, when you know what you should do about it, is it also for you possible, now today for example, is it possible for me to take Safaricom to court? Because only Safaricom then can be able to go to that politician and ask them, where did you get access to this information? Because my data is with Safaricom as a subscriber of Safaricom. Because I then can only force Safaricom to tell the politician to say where they got my data. But then again, is that possible for me as an individual, for me to be able to go to court, to be able to begin a court process against an institution? Is it something that I can afford, or is the cost of justice just too much and it makes people say it's okay?
All right. Because Philip has stayed the shortest time here, one last for you. Can, as you make your closing remarks, social media and traditional media, in terms of credibility, can social media replace traditional media when it comes to credibility?
No. Traditional media still owns the credibility. It's the main verification tool. Social media is only a conveyor belt. So as much as we make noise online, we still go to the mainstream media to actually verify. So there's no way social media is actually going to replace traditional media. It actually complements in terms of talkability and even conversation in depth, but it will never replace traditional
Your
media.
last word.
Yeah. I just want to talk about the data privacy. I think My last word is there's no privacy. I think we talk about the data protection laws, but we give so much information to the digital space, as in where we live, where we stay. So we also need to understand the information we actually put out in the digital space can actually be used against us.
Your last word, Jen, as a winner.
Yeah, no, I was going to agree with him in terms of the privacy. We really do not have any, especially if you were to just open up an account, any account, the level of detail about your own personal life that you give out there is astounding. But yes, so my last word would be with regards to the fake information. Let's be careful, especially online, with what we send out, especially on WhatsApp. WhatsApp is our largest way of communicating in Kenya. When you receive a message saying forwarded as received, think twice about forwarding it to the next person. And if you look at that information and you're not sure about it, stop, reflect, verify. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you all, gentlemen and lady, for joining us. Charles Mugai, he's in charge of digital media at KBC. Jane, working with Nendo and Philip Ogola, a digital strategist and head of digital communications with Azimio. By the way, we have kept off politics of Azimio and Kenya Kwanza. We have only discussed social media, absolutely. And probably if we have time, we will talk about bias. The ones we're seeing, of course, Media Council released their figures yesterday or the day before yesterday, and you know what the figures were looking like. But that was just about traditional media. I don't know whether social media is that bias or it's just perceived. But once we have time, we can talk about that any other time. Thank you very much for watching Kenya Decides. My name is John Jacob Kieria. Have yourself a fantastic night. God bless.
Every day, we empower our members to innovate, to build, to lead. And every day, they're transforming Africa. Equity. Karibu member.
Top sports attractions on KBC Channel 1. In July, Kenya Morans face off against the DRC, Egypt and Senegal in the FIBA Basketball World Cup African qualifiers in Alexandria, Egypt from 1st to 3rd of July 2022. Also in July, Kenya plays South Africa